What is up, most distinguished patrons of this channel? Today we are going to do some junkyard welding, and I can't wait. So let's get into it. If you've been around welding long enough, then you probably received a ticket to what we're going to be talking about in this video. And that has to do with like unfortunate fit-ups, we'll call it, where this plate here, which we're going to weld, has a gigantic gap on one side, almost 3/8 of an inch. It probably is 3/8 of an inch on the side there. And the real world dictates that, well, everything can't be fit up perfectly. We would like that it was fit up perfectly, but that's just unrealistic. That's why in this video, we're going to be focusing predominantly with stick welding, and we're going to talk about ways to deal with this to get a decent end result. Now, keep in mind, when you have big giant gaps like this and you have to weld it together, the actual strength of what you're left with is, well, it's up for debate. It's really hard to predict how strong a weld might be on something like this. That's why it's best to kind of follow best practice and kind of hope for the best. I mean, let's face it, if it's something critical, you probably should spend the time to come up with a better fit up somehow. Not to mention, whatever you weld like this, it's going to warp like hell when you try and join these two pieces. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in this video too, how to minimize the distortion doing a repair on something like this will cause. So the first thing we need to cover is a little bit of book learning, and then we're going to be setting this up to weld. So depicted here is kind of like the joint that I'm going to be welding on today, where we're wide open on the top, narrow on the bottom. Yours may be a little bit different, but guess what? The advice I'm going to give to you will work for any situation that you might find yourself in. The first thought that you should probably make to yourself is it possible to put metal to bridge the gap rather than just trying to weld it all the way out? Now, many times I've found myself in situations like this. I didn't happen to have any metal handy, so that kind of was scratched off the list. If you happen to have metal, that should be your first thought, because the time it's going to take to bridge this would be better served simply welding a piece of metal in here, roughly the size, cut to the size and shape of this to tie this together. But like I said, hey, real world, you might not have any. Now, some of you out there are probably thinking, well, this is a job for Texas TIG, aka you knock the flux off a welding rod and you weld with that along with the stick electrode, much like, well, a cheap version, backwoods version of TIG welding. And I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of that. On non-critical stuff, which, well, let's face it, doing welds on stuff like this, if it was critical, your fit up would have to be better. The issue I have with doing that is the filler rod, aka the center core rod of the welding electrode, is designed to produce a weld of known strength with the flux interacting with it. And by knocking the flux off of it, that filler rod is not going to perform like, say, ER70 TIG wire or something to that effect. So you're likely producing a far weaker weld than if you were to actually just weld with it, and likely you're going to have issues with brittleness of it, would be my guess. So I would tend to avoid doing Texas TIG unless it's absolutely like, say, a fence post or something. Who cares? But even on, most things that are broke, you probably need at least some level of known strength to get it to hold. So my recommendation, stay away from Texas TIG unless it's your absolute only option. As far as what welding rod to use with this, I'm a big fan of 6010 or 6011. In this video, I'm going to use 6010. Both of those rods freeze incredibly fast. Therefore, you're able to stack metal and bridge gaps far easier. Rods like 6013, the ones we have here in the States, 7018, the puddle's so liquid that the weldability of something like this is just going to be very tough, although it's doable, and I'll give you advice on how to do that. But I'm going to use 6010, 6011 until I get bridged across, and then I'm going to fill it in with 7018. As far as actual technique, let's talk about that. So you have a couple options. One of the smarter ways to do this is to deposit a weld on the side of this plate here, something like this, let it cool a little bit, deposit another weld until you can close up this gap, and then you run a stringer pass to tie everything together to get this all to bridge together. That's one way of doing it. Doing it this way will allow you to use other rods, like even 7018, you could theoretically do this with to get it to bridge over. Now, keep in mind, one of the biggest issues with doing this with, like, say, 7018 and a lot of other rods that aren't fast freeze is you're going to have to run this vertical up. You do not have the ability to run it downhill because you're going to produce very ugly, terrible looking welds. The problem is when you run downhill, you input less heat and you can move faster and you can get it to lay flatter. Running uphill, like with 6010, 6011, you're going to put a lot of heat into this and it's going to be very difficult to control, especially multiple passes when you're just trying to bridge it. You're going to have to give it extra time to cool down, and it takes more skill to run uphill versus downhill. Now, keep in mind, downhill does have less penetration than uphill. However, in the case of what we're dealing with here, where it's only 1/4 inch thick steel, I don't really see that as a downside. Again, this is probably something non-critical. The goal is to get it to join together and then to weld over that with a stronger pass as some other rod besides 6010, 6011. So running downhill is not really a concern of mine. Depicted here is more or less the gap that is left once you bridge everything over. What you can do at this point is with 6010, 6011 is run vertical down, and you want to push that rod into the gap and try and get it to deposit metal further in. Like if you hold an arc gap off of the face of it, what's going to end up happening is you're going to bridge across it and you're not going to have a very strong tie-in. So that's why I'm going to push that rod in there pretty good to try and fuse further than just the surface. Now, if the gap is still too big, but it's consistent start to finish, top to bottom, one thing you can do is run a quick pass with the 6010, 6011, where you deposit a little bit of metal on both sides. You go in there with a wire wheel or something, clean it up a little bit quick, and then you get it to where the gap is more consistent, to where it's easier to fuse the sides together. This works really good if the gap is close to what you need and you just need to kind of get things a little bit closer. The problem with doing that on this when it's wide open is, well, you're going to have to like jump around to try and deposit it. So that's not really going to work. Although you could technically on the edge here run a quick pass just to keep depositing metal to bring that out. That's also a possibility. It really comes down to your skill level with stick welding as to what you can really get away with on this. All right, well, I'm going to go tack that plate to the table here, get set up, and we're going to weld it, and I'm going to show you some of the techniques. So I'm going to strike the arc up top. Now, if you didn't have that joined together with a tack weld, you'd have to stack metal to try and get it tacked together like I did. The technique I'm using is like a slight drag angle, and I'm doing a little bit of a stitch motion. The main reason I'm stitching it is to keep the flux on the rod burning off consistent. If I just try to do a single pull, one motion stringer, what would end up happening is you tend to get arc blow because the flux won't burn off consistently. The goal here is to get as much metal as possible between those plates in order to decrease the gap. I'm trying to aim that rod to where the weld deposits well onto the plate. You don't want the weld in that upper right picture to be far to the right to where you're trying to bridge at an angle to the plate. Get the metal where it's more or less in line with the plate. Well, I think you get the idea, so you just repeat as necessary until the gap is weldable. I'm going to speed it up now and we're going to move on. So I apologize, most of this is obscured with my big head. Of course, I got everything else right, and then on this final weld, my head blocked most of it, but we'll still talk about what I'm doing. So the goal is to push the rod in where you feel actual pressure on it, to where the metal is kind of fire hosing out through the plate, not just welding the surface. It takes a little bit of practice. It's something that I should do a video on to help you guys. But needless to say, as I'm welding that, I am putting a lot of pressure on the rod to the point it almost wants to cut out and stick. But by doing that, the metal will get deposited through the plate and fuse things as good as you're going to get. Now, about an inch below the top, I missed a tie-in where there's a little bit of a hole. I went back and welded that vertical up. Ideally, you would grind that out a little bit and then weld it in order to get better fusion, but for this, it really doesn't matter. So now I'm going to weld vertical up with 332/70/18. I'm running the exact same settings I did with the 6010. That's one of the greatest benefits of these two rod combos is you don't have to go back to the welding machine to change things up, and you can run one downhill uphill and the other one 70/18 uphill. Anyways, I'm doing a weave motion. It's something that I do to try and get things done faster. I try and limit the weave width to no more than maybe 2.5 times, 2 times what the rod with the flux diameter is. On this, I'm going to weave a significant bit wider than that. And again, non-critical stuff. When you weave super wide, it tends to build poor grain structure. So be aware of that. You will lose strength going with a wide weave. All I'm really doing is bringing the weld pool over to the sides while slowly increasing in height. I'm paying attention to the weld pool underneath the rod. If it's looking like it's getting really long and about to drip, it means I need to move faster or reduce my amperage. For restarts, I tend to start ahead and then drag down quickly and circle around to fill in. That's a technique that works pretty good, and it helps eliminate starting porosity. You can actually start directly on it and then move. It takes a little bit more skill to do that without getting that dreaded starting porosity of 70/18. Vertical up, it tends to be far less of a risk though. Anyways, it's just fill and repeat. Weave to the side, hold it for a little bit, and go all the way up. Yes, it takes skill. No, you're not going to be able to do this without practice, but it will come to you. Just practice and you will get this movement. If your heat input is right and your travel speed is right, it's amazing what you can weld with 70/18 and make look decent. Well, let's speed this up and take a look at what we got. Well, here's our completed weld. There's a little touch of undercut ever so slightly up here, which, hey, let's face it, I was weaving pretty wide to try and cover all of this, and it got super nuclear hot near the top. I really didn't give this much time to cool down between passes, and then when I went and capped this sucker off, it definitely was heat soaked already, so a little bit more time to let it cool down would have done a lot of good for this. Now, I could have done a bunch of stringer welds on this rather than weaving it. I did the weave because it's more or less faster and to a certain extent a little bit easier, but you really got to watch your heat input because you're just going to end up undercutting the sides as it gets heat soaked, kind of like what I had up here. But overall, this was pretty successful. And again, this is non-critical work. You're not going to be doing high liability stuff like, say, repairing a arm on an excavator, doing stuff like this, bridging big gaps. But on stuff that's non-critical, like a dumpster or something else where you just want to get done with the job and not screw around, this is about the fastest way to do it. Well, I'm going to cut this in half and etch it, and we're going to take a look at what it looks like inside of this, just for, I guess, shits and giggles. All right, I got this all cut and etched. Let's take a look. So as you can see, there's actually quite a bit of reinforcement on the back side, and that's because we layered those welds where I said in line with the plate. Now this amount of weld is, I wouldn't say excessive, because at this point it's about perfect. We more or less have a fillet weld on both sides of it. The reality is the further down the plate you go where the gap was non-existent, you're only going to have weld on the left side there. Now defect wise on this cut and etch, there's a little bit of a slag inclusion bubble there. Pretty typical. I didn't clean it the best when I went to cap it, so had I used a wire wheel and a pick and cleaned it a little bit better, I would have likely eliminated that. And keep in mind, when you're carrying a lot of metal and vertical up, it's very hard for it to chew in and penetrate much and consume stuff like that little slag inclusion there. But from a strength perspective, that's about of no consequence in this. That's not going to cause a failure. And like I said, this is non-critical stuff, so this is more than strong enough for anything that you would really need for non-critical. And you can see this is the other side. There is no slag inclusion there, but everything is kind of tied in together. The back side of it's going to look pretty rough because of the amount of metal that we had to fill.
and that's just to be expected. You're not going to get pretty looking backside welds with that big of a gap and running multiple passes. If you have access to both sides, well, obviously you could go and grind that down and re-weld it to make it look better, but from a strength perspective, it's not really a detriment, I would say. And here you can see where that big gap was, and again, it's going to look rough. There's really no way around this. Realistically, this is more than strong enough for a majority of work you might do, so having this as the backside isn't the end of the world, but if you're worried about it, fix it.
Well, we were successful in our repair in this video. Now, in the real world, this would probably have 20 years of paint on it and a bunch of cow dung, but hey, I didn't really want to breathe all of that in here in a tin shed. But anyways, we were successful and the quality of our work was pretty good. Keep in mind, just like I said in the cut and etch, your reinforcement on the back of this is going to be questionable at best. And it's not really a big deal, to be honest. Depending on what you're repairing, it probably doesn't even matter if you had weld reinforcement on the back of the plate. And if you were welding this from one side anyways, you're never going to have melt through if the joint's tight anyways. So like I said, everything we had here was honestly better than I would have expected. It's not too often that I actually do a cut and etch on something like this. I generally would repair it out in the field and never see what the backside looks like, never do a cut and etch, obviously. Now, this is a repair that could make you a lot of money in the real world. You wouldn't even need anything fancy, a simple cheap engine driver or just a portable stick welder and power, obviously, for it, unless you have a current bush handy. And you can go out to some place and do a repair like this and get paid for it and make a pretty good living because not many people can do stuff like this. And since it's stick welding, guess what? You can do it out in the cold, out with wind blowing, in the rain, whatever. You know, this is a very valuable skill to have in the real world. Hopefully, this video helped you out, gave you some knowledge on what you should be looking for, and maybe gave you a little bit of confidence so that you can start practicing to do this or get good enough to go out in the real world and start offering your services. So, with that said, until next time.